Mōrena tātou. Welcome everyone to Day 2, Session 2 of the annual budget hearing of submissions. Lovely to see those people who have made a submission and who have come to present this morning. I'd like to explain that the meeting has been recorded and will be live streamed on Council's YouTube channel. We have health and safety requirements for the Council chamber, and very soon it will come on the screen. So, fire and emergency. On hearing the alarm, please leave the exit immediately by the nearest fire exit, and they're well lit. Evacuate to the assembly area, the clock tower, Te Marae o Hine, the square. Health and safety. Smoking is prohibited within any council public entrance, building or site. A defibrillator is located at the front of the house on the grounds floor. And please report any near miss or incidences to the committee administrator, who is Sarah. Sarah and Sina, both to my right. Online participants are to keep their cameras turned on and microphones muted unless addressing the meeting. Councillors in person to select the option in the voting device if you wish to ask a question. Councillors are all very familiar with that. And councillors online to use the hands up function. And we do have 3 councillors online at the moment. Mōrena kia koutou, good morning. Please ask councillors and presenters, that's my job there, to ask you to say your name before speaking and to speak into the microphone. Sometimes with that microphone, you might have to move it forward a bit so that we can hear you, but that would be, if we do, someone will indicate to you. With this, I'd like to start in earnest, our session this morning in earnest, and ask Councillor Katie Zebulon to start with our karakia. Thank you, Councillor.
Kia ora whaia. Me noe tātou. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauritu, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumi e hui e, tae ki e.
Tēnā koe, Councillor. We have apologies for lateness from the Mayor. He will be in as soon as he's able to. He's currently on council business. Any other apologies? Thank you. Could I ask for someone to move that? Thank you, Councillor Barrett and Councillor Hancock for seconding that. And can we very shortly move on that? Thank you. Even IT has a slow day from time to time. Councillors, can I just ask you check your devices? Thank you, that you have submitted something. There we have it. Unanimous, passed unanimously. Thank you very much. And what I'd like to do now is to invite Marion Dean down. Marion is with the age-friendly Palmerston North. Kia ora, Marion. And just for all those who are making submissions today, to let you know that we have a traffic light system here, and green is the floor's all yours and you can make your presentation. Amber, a bit like, okay, we're getting close to the end here, and red, you've got 2 minutes from there to complete your submission. We really are grateful that you've all come to make a submission, and I know it can be a bit daunting, but please know that all the council around here definitely want to hear from you. So I invite Marion up the front. Thank you, Marion.
just turn it on, Marion.
Oh, it's the button in the middle, Marion, and it's just, oh, there we go. Natalia's helping me. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you to you all for hearing this submission from Age Friendly Palmerston North. Age Friendly Palmerston North would like to see budget allocated in this long-term plan for Palmerston North City Council and the city to ultimately work to gain World Health accreditation for Palmerston North to be recognised as an age-friendly city. At a previous council meeting, the council agreed to investigate the process of applying for funding, and we understand that a council staff member has been designated this role already. So thank you for that. We understand this process is underway. We congratulate the City Council for acknowledging the place its seniors hold in the city and for taking up the challenge to becoming an age-friendly city. However, we note that no provision has been made in the draft long-term plan for a budget towards the costs which may be incurred during the investigation and in the first few months of the project. So we want to be assured that we're not going to lose traction on this. We understand there may be options for the council to recover costs through funding to the Ministry of Seniors. Why we think it's so important is that we think that whilst Palmerston North is a great city for older people to live in, and it certainly deserves to be recognised nationally and internationally as being age-friendly, we still think that there are things that could be done to improve it. And we started working 7.5 years ago, more possibly, and our group, which is made up of old organisations representing seniors and other organisations like Sport Manawatu and the District Health Board, have been working on this. One of the key issues is to have a strategic plan, and we developed one some years ago, but it will need updating. So please, don't let's lose the traction that's been built up already. Let's put Palmerston North City on the map as an age-friendly city. So please include something in the long term, in the annual plan budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion. And I'd just like to invite any one of the councillors, if any of you have questions of Marion. Councillor Johnson?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Sorry, I thought I was in the queue. Thank you, Marion, for your submission and for bringing this to our attention again. How many different groups or organisations do you think are represented in the age-friendly group?
Well, we've got Tūwhatu Ora, Mid-Central, Grey Power, Alzheimer's Manawatu, Sport Manawatu. We've even had representation from city councillors, my own organisation, Age Concern, and we have support from the Palmerston North City Council Senior Reference Group. We have had other groups represented in the past, including the Ethnic Council, Multicultural Council.
Thank you. And you said in your submission that a lot of work has gone into it. What has been the barrier to moving forward, do you think?
I think, well, personally, it's where the ownership lies. Certainly, we need the support of the council to move forward on this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to Councillor Barrett. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Marion. The written submission says that it's been a number of years that this has been an ambition. I think 20 2018 is the first actual date in the submission. Could you recall for us the kind of first year that this was actually mooted in any discussions within these mini groups that you just listed off?
Well, unfortunately, I only became involved in 2018, but the group had been going for a number of years before that, yes. And apparently, initially, there was a big meeting to set the thing in motion, and I don't know, there were 50 or 60 people. And then we had a meeting here in the council chamber in 2018 to look at what would be in the strategic plan, and there were certainly over 50 people here, and we were in working groups looking at what the challenges were for older people under the headings which the World Health Organization requires us to look at. And then we drafted a strategic plan which ran from 2018 for 3 years. Yes, so, and then after that we meet regularly once a month, yeah. And we have done other work looking at where we can work together on issues that affect older people in the city, yeah, so.
Oh, thanks for that comprehensive answer. So it clearly predates the 2018 then?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Any insight that you've been able to glean or the group's been able to glean around once an application is lodged with the World Health Organization, kind of how long you might expect that process to take? Well,
the first stage is to register or apply to the Office for Seniors, who have a body called Age Friendly Aotearoa. Okay. And so that's the first stage. And then after that, it would be applying to the World Health Organization accreditation, for a World Health Organization accreditation.
Great. Thank you for that clarification, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Marion and your supporter, for coming today. We have no further questions, but we are very grateful for your presentation. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you.
The next speaker up is David Chappell from St Matthew's Anglican Church. He has a PowerPoint presentation as well, and he is submission number 78 on page 168. And David, just for ease, I'm going to also have you for the next one because you've got another submission in.
Good morning. Thank you.
When you're ready, David.
Well, good morning, councillors. 2 submissions, but they're really much the same. So I hope we can get them both in time for you. I'm here initially on behalf of St Matthew's Church, which is adjacent to the right-of-way between College Street and Winchester Street. It's a matter that I've spoken to the council about on a number of occasions and on 2 previous years. I have some photos. I'm sorry, my photos are around the wrong way, but it's the next item I was going to talk about. But perhaps we could deal with that as one first, seeing the photos there. In the upgrade of the village, Awapuni Village, River Stop, when the cycleway was put through, there was some work done on the planting areas. We've got shows you the present condition of them. If we could have the next one. For some inexplicable reason, they put a small piece of lawn around the corner, and I guess someone has to bring a lawnmower down every time they want to mow it. Which is not very often. And the next one, that shows the state of it. I had a good walk around Cuba Street the other day, and I was delighted at the detail and the design input that's gone into it. And my suggestion, and what I'd like to see some allowance to have some of that talent and that design input put into some of these areas, because they just seem to happen. The curbing is all damaged. It's not in a very good state at all. If it wasn't for Bev here on my right, who, when no one's watching, come and does weeding and puts in the occasional little flowers and things, that would be even worse. So I think they're only small areas, but they are important to the community, and people notice them. And when they get down like this, they notice them even more, and they don't respect them. So I think we deserve better than that. Thank you. That's that point. The other photos I have here are about the right-of-way between College Street and Winchester Street. This is some of the graffiti which is on the walls of the church. Those panels were put there years ago to try and encourage intentional graffiti. It worked for about 6 months, and then it doesn't. I have painted those out. They are now okay. But if we go through to the next, just slip through them, that's another one of it. And that's the fence. And I have a photograph here which I showed you 2 years ago. And I have to say that the graffiti looks remarkably the same. It was 16th of the 5th, 2022. And that looks the same to me. I know that a couple of months ago somebody did some work on the paving, and because the tree roots come through it, and replaced a couple of palings. But this is a dangerous area. It's not a safe area. And this is the last time that I'll be coming here because I don't now have an official role in the church. But I would like to see some sort of consultation between the church on the left and the other side as to what can happen. The last one is again the what I call the shy streetlight. On the top of that pole is a streetlight. And again, 2 years ago, I submitted a similar photograph. These are the neighbours' trees, and I can't see any reason why that sort of situation should exist. I would not go down there at night. In fact, I was reluctant to go in the daytime to paint out the graffiti because it's got a dog leg in it, you can't tell who's coming. So it's not a safe area, but it needs regular maintenance and it needs some sort of understanding that this is the case. It's a much used right-of-way. I was surprised at the number of people. I was there for an hour and a half, and I was surprised at the number of people who came through, and they all chatted to me. But it needs work. It needs regular maintenance and care, and it hasn't been getting that. So I asked it, and I think the first thing to do would be to have some sort of consultation with the church, which, although only next door, has some sort of oversight of it as well. So turning, if I may, to the main part of what we wanted to talk about was the river stop Awapuni village area.
Excuse me, David,
Yes.
can I just, I do have two people who'd like to ask you a question
All right,
pertaining
please.
to the,
Thank you. Yes.
to the first part of your submission.
Yes.
And over to Councillor Zebulon, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, David. I just had a couple of questions I wanted to clarify. The walkway that you're referring to, is that,
Yes.
that goes from the church, connects it up to the
No,
street
it just
with
goes alongside the
community
church
centre?
from College Street through to Winchester Street. So it serves the people in Rugby Street and around that area to come through to the shops.
Excellent.
And
I think
particularly
I've walked through that.
school people, yeah, school kids. going
And
through.
the street light, then that photograph, is that in the walkway?
Yes, it's at the dog leg. It's got and it's right in the corner there.
Excellent, right, I know where we are now. That's great. And I also just wanted to ask, who owns the walkway? Is it owned by
The council.
the council? Brilliant. That's all from me. Thank you.
It was, I should clarify, it was owned by the church many years ago, but it was always a public right-of-way, and so the title was transferred to the council, and they undertook the maintenance of it at that time.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Over to Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, David. And Councillor Isabella has actually covered most of what I was going to ask. Just in terms of reporting the graffiti, did you report that to council at all?
Yes, it has been reported, yes. I haven't done it personally, but I understand it has been reported. Yeah, I don't think anything's happened for it.
And Madam Chair, with
Sure.
your indulgence, could I just perhaps ask a question through you to council officers, just in terms of our capacity to actually clean up that kind of graffiti around the city and our
Certainly,
spaces?
Mr.
Thanks.
Councillor.
Bryce Hosking, Acting Chief Infrastructure Officer. So we do have a staff member on hand whose primary role is to go around and remove graffiti. As things are reported to us, we try to attend to them in as a timely manner as possible, and I'm happy to include this on their run moving forward.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Dave. Two questions for you, if I might. The first one is you spoke of your views around Cuba Street and how much you enjoyed what had happened there. Then you took us to kind of some maintenance level issues, I would say, in Awapuni. Are you ultimately advocating for kind of a full renewal the way that Cuba Street was done, or is it more really an emphasis of just getting the maintenance done well?
I think it's more than maintenance. I think it's a little bit of design input, a little bit of input as to how it's done would be worthwhile, because if you do it well, and it won't need much maintenance.
Great.
But at the moment, it looks like it needs maintenance on a regular basis, which it's not getting.
Thank you for that.
We've had some fruit trees planted in there, which we don't tell anybody about, do we? Because we don't want them taken out, but they're growing. Yes, certainly, please.
Yep, go for it.
Bev Page, I'm part of the River Stop Awapuni, and I'm losing my voice, so I won't talk for long. But when we planted the trees, and they're doing really well, I was asked if I would water them, so I did during the summer, and they're lovely. We've got pears this size. Someone's eaten the mandarins, which is wonderful. That's what they're there for. But I water the garden, but nothing else gets done. So now I go down there on a regular basis and try and weed, but as David pointed out, the little grass verge, which is actually mowed with a weed eater by the council. And so when it's done with a weed eater, it's all over the road and all over the footpath, which is really not good. And River Stop Awapuni, the idea of that group was to beautify the area, make people proud of the area, which we had done. As you can see in Annette's submission, who I'm here on behalf of because she's not well. We're doing that over the last 5 years. We've done a lot in Awapuni with a lot of council support and recommendations, so thank you for that. But now the garden area I did volunteer to look after the garden outside Boho Cafe, which I do on a regular basis, and plant my little flowers and things. But I can't look after the grass and the wooden. If you noticed in the photo, they've put a wooden piece of wood around the footpath to stop the mulch falling on the footpath and the road. It's all broken, there's nails, so I go down with my hammer and hit them in occasionally. But I'm not up to shifting the wood and cutting the grass. I'm not going to cart my mower down there. So that is what we're worried about, because if you don't take pride in the place, nobody else will.
Indeed. Thank you for that further explanation. My other question, Dave, was you used a term that I wasn't very familiar with, which is intentional graffiti. And I just wondered if you could tell us, in your mind, when you say the words intentional graffiti, what do you mean and how does that differentiate from other forms of graffiti?
Well, there's always been graffiti in that area. So they used to put it onto the building, which was harder to get off, I guess. And so there were some panels were put up and young people were invited to do some artwork on the panels. Right. In the hope that would release their energy and they wouldn't do it anywhere else. But it lasted for a while, but as generations have moved on, the panels are still there, but covered by layers of grey paint to paint out what's there.
Thank you for
It was
that
a good
clarification.
intention, but it didn't last, Hugh.
Yeah, great, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That's the end of the questions from that part. But David and Bev, if you'd like to continue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As Bev said, we work hard to enhance the Riverstop Village. And we have event recently, the History Walk down to the Marai and Maxwell's Line, which we want to say thank you to the council for the funding to be able to do that. It was a very interesting afternoon, and we planned some more, and to try and get people an understanding of the history of the area and the background, and again make them familiar with the place where they live. But going back to the cycleway, a lot of things were talked about when that was done, and I feel they haven't really been finished. So one of them was to try and slow the traffic. And so the word slow has been painted on the road. I think that means fast to some people because it doesn't seem to have any effect. Slower speed limits in all sorts of other parts of the city. We were told at the time when it was done that it wasn't within the council's, the council couldn't do that, but I see now it's happening in other places. So we'd ask you to include this area in your considerations for slowing traffic. It's a constant problem. Also, at the time when the parking laybys were put in, there were bus shelters there, and I have mentioned this before, and they're still not there. They were to be replaced, but they're not replaced. So all down College Street, there are no bus shelters at the bus stops. So I think that was going to be quite a difficult exercise because all the space was taken up with the parking lay-by, but there was an understanding that they would be back, so we would like to see that happen. We'd also like to see, we're strong on making a connection between the village and the river because this is the closest little stop to the river. It's not that far away. And so we'd like to try and explore some signage which links the river to the College Street area so that people can see that this is a way that they can walk down there and enjoy the river. Yes, please. Yes.
We also have, excuse me, our Awapuni Library, which is evidently the busiest library in the city, and at the moment it's closed because there's a water leak on the floor. I still don't know where it's coming from. Laura Clifford, who is a librarian down there, has done a wonderful job. At the moment, she's got a large TV on the window telling you where all the activities that happen at the library, where they're being held in the meantime. And for several years now, we've submitted that the council look at an alternative for the Awapuni Library in Awapuni. It's outgrown the business that it has there. If you go down to a school holiday program, there's bodies everywhere. There's no room anymore. It's extreme. It's like a community space for Awapuni. So and it's written the submission there. I think we would like the council to revisit the Awapuni Library site. And there was talk of the Panako Place building that's listed here somewhere. David probably knows more about that.
Well, this is also linked up with the ability to look at the St Mark's Church site, which is now not used in the way it was. And I think there's a submission on that from the Pathways Church to say, can we have a look at that? This would be an ideal site. It's in the community. At the moment, the community centre, which I think you've got a submission from this afternoon, is absolutely chocker as well. That's round in Newbury Street. So there is the potential for doing something really good here, right in the heart of the place, and I think just reinforcing all those things. The library closed is, there are no toilets there now because everybody knows they're in the library, so you can go there. There's nowhere else to go. We are, in the next month, I hope, we've just received a community defibrillator to put on the wall of the service station, which has been funded for us. And I'm hoping that I'll get that up there within the next month or so. So there are still things happening to create the community feel and make people feel that this is a place rather than just something you move through. But certainly that site is really, these opportunities don't come very often, I'm sure, and this would be a really good one.
And I think, excuse me, probably the last one is and I don't know whether it's actually council business, but the right turn in Botanical Road, College Street intersection by West End School. If you want to turn right, if you're coming up Botanical Road or coming down Botanical Road, it's almost impossible, especially at peak times, which is everywhere in the city, I have to say. But that corner is very dangerous, and I know people have looked into it and said there hasn't been many accidents, but there's been several incidents where people have been knocked off their bikes, cars have had near misses, in fact cars have actually hit each other, and I've seen this happen, but because there's no damage, nothing's reported, the council aren't there watching it. It's a very dangerous intersection, and I think it needs to be looked at.
I followed the debate that the council had on that intersection, and I was, I guess, a little disappointed that statistics seem to take charge over the uses that are there. But to me, the one thing that struck me about it is that if you have a right turn lane and right turn phase in the lights, that might delay everybody just a little bit, but it will give some certainty. At the moment, there is no certainty if you come into that right-hand lane that you will get round the corner. So after you've waited 2 or 3 phases, you sort of take your chances. And that's a recipe for disaster in the long term. So they'll give certainty that you know you will get round. It might take a little bit longer, but you will get there. And at the moment, you don't have that certainty. So that's the difference when having it. I think that's all. Can I just make one last comment, because this is probably the last time I'll be appearing before you, that the first time I got involved in physical planning matters for the council was something like 40 years ago, when I was chairman of the City Council's Physical Planning Subcommittee. And we produced a number of documents, guidelines, made comments on various developments, private and council. And I'm disappointed that we don't seem to be able to get the same level, as I say, of Cuba Street in our thinking around other parts of the city. I was quoted in the paper at the time as saying the city was scruffy, and I think it's a comment which I'm unfortunately have to say again, that in some areas the city is scruffy. Thank you.
Thank you, David and Bev. I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Johnson, who has a question for you.
Thank you. Thank you for your submissions. In terms of the College Street turning, were you aware that Council has already made a decision to change that?
Well, I thought it was, yeah, I wasn't sure if it had actually gone through, yes.
But, but has it gone through? It's not in the immediate future, is it?
Well, I mean, it's probably not my place to discuss that with you now.
No.
Well, what we're
I just
saying,
wondered
don't
if you had been aware that that decision
Yes,
had been
we are
made.
aware that you have.
Get on with it, yes.
Made a decision. Thank you. I won't go any further.
Okay. And then the second question is just that you've raised a lot of issues of maintenance. Do you have another means of raising these in between time? Because it's a long time between submission opportunities. So how are you raising these maintenance issues, in between the annual budget submissions?
I have raised it by emailing the council, and it was, first of all, there wasn't anything on that corner. There was no gardens or anything, and so we talked about it in Riverstop Awapuni, and then I emailed the council and I got no reply. So then I emailed the mayor, and then he actually put me on to the right people to sort it out, and it happened from then.
Okay, so in terms of, say, ringing customer services, do you do that if there's a maintenance issue?
No, because I was told it's better to email. And you always get an answer if you email, I do say. There's always a response.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering if briefly we could seek clarification through you from officers around the process around that intersection. My understanding is that it's been referred to the annual budget but not yet decided, but just thought it'd be good to clarify that for the submitters while they're here.
Certainly. Staff?
Yes, correct. So it has been referred to the annual budget for the right turn lane to be confirmed next month, and then the substantive stuff around some of the cycleways and things was deferred to the LTP.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Chamber, good morning. Thank you very much, both of you, and I'm sure, the council can make some inroads with the garden and whatnot, and have a bit of a tidy up there, I'm sure. I just noticed your last comment about town looking shabby, and I have to agree with you. And, I think it's a shame that, we've got so many buildings in the city which...
Excuse me, Councillor, do you have a question?
No, I don't actually, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Kāpai, I think we've got the gist of that, though.
Can I just comment to that question? That my concern was that in tight times, those are the areas which get cut back on in budgets. And I want to make certain that the regular maintenance and the upkeep of things carries on. And that was the reason for bringing it here, to make sure that there is budget allowance for it.
Thank you, David and Bev, for attending this morning. I do want to just say something to you about the library at Awapuni, because we're all aware of that. And recently we moved, because we lease that building, repairs are being made, and hopefully that will be up and running soon. I understand the mobile library goes there also from time to time, but please know that there is action occurring right now.
Yeah, as from the church, we're really happy to accommodate the bus, and we're also accommodating the Thursday morning teas, and I can tell you it's a real buzz, but it's not the same.
Understand. Thank you both very much. Kia ora. Next up, I'd like to invite Judy Seacombe and Roy Tankersley, who is speaking on behalf of Pathways Presbyterian Church. This is submission number 46 on page 97. Welcome, Judy and Roy.
I've got the green light. Kia ora tātou, councillors. We are here on behalf of the submission which has been put forward by Annette Nixon. This last year has seen the completion of earthquake strengthening at St Andrew's site at Pathways Presbyterian Church, and a celebration for its return to the historic inner city site as a worship centre. And we are grateful and thank the Palmerston North City Council for their contribution towards this achievement through the Natural and Cultural Heritage Incentive Fund grant made available. Funds for the remedial work were supplemented by further funding to modify the interior to provide a more fit-for-purpose venue for public worship, for performance and for events, especially music ministry and promoting musical events, and of course having flexible seating. The space interior can be organised for any sorts of arts events, visual or otherwise. And we appreciated the interest from the Mayor, the Mayoress and some councillors who viewed the improvements at a recent visit.
Good morning, everyone. There. Good morning, everyone. So we dovetail in quite nicely with the previous submitter, speaking about Pathways Presbyterian Church. So our future plans, I think Annette has discussed this quite frequently at your meetings. The St Andrews site is back in use, but we continue to review the use of the St David's site, which is on Main Street in Terrace End. It's a range of community-focused programs operate there, but currently no worship services because the church is due for demolition as an earthquake risk. 2 other churches do use the facility at St David's, so they hire it from us. So at St Mark's in Awapuni, which has been mentioned, we reiterate the potential of the site. So I'm sure you're all aware of it. There's a little church on the sideline, not far from the St Matthew's Church. There's a huge grass area, and then there's the old Panako Place Hall. So there's huge potential there for construction of a building, and we have for many years proposed a community centre there. We're getting pressure from the National Church now to disperse of buildings that are not of use to us in our parish. So we want to reiterate the potential of that site for community development. The Parish Council are going to have to make some decisions about our land very shortly, and that place may well be put on the market. Currently the property houses the op shop, and we lease the church building to the Koromako Vineyard Church. So we're not actually using the site at all. The hall behind the church is due for demolition. The manse is behind the church itself, which we also own, and we are currently letting that to an Afghanistan family of 9. So for many years, the community feedback has noted this land as a possible site for a purpose-built community library / community hub to meet the growing residential, recreational and social activity in the area. It's perfectly placed right opposite where the current library is. No, not the current library, the boho and the shopping centre. And I was going to mention the library leak as well. I'm thinking it's a good opportunity for you to seriously consider building a community centre on that site. There's lots of space. So we recommend your continued attention to this potential site for community facility development. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy and Roy. I have Councillor Hancock and Councillor Brett Barrett have questions to ask of you. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming in. Just a very quick question, just in terms of the St Mark's building, does that have any earthquake issues with it, or is it a sound building?
The building site itself, the building church part that the Koromako use, which has an adjoining kitchen, office and toilets, is earthquake strengthened. The hall is attached to that building at the back. It's got a beautiful wooden floor, but unfortunately it's fire and earthquake risk.
Okay.
And
how many square metres is that that building?
Oh,
itself?
don't ask me difficult questions.
No, you don't know?
How many square metres?
That's okay. I don't need to know. It was just a...
It's about, the hall is about the same size as the church.
Right, okay. Thank you.
That helps.
Great, thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. I was interested around your St. David's facility in Terrace End. When you describe that as reviewing, can you give us a sense of the scope of that review, or are kind of all options on the table, or are there some options that are kind of off the table and you're kind of looking at just limited options there?
Well, currently the church is going to be demolished. So behind the church, if you're looking from Main Street, behind the church there is a community room, a big hall and a lighthouse facility where we have children's programs running.
Okay.
So it's a very busy place all the time. The church is to the front, more towards Main Street,
Yes.
and then there's a big parking area to the left of that. So we need to review, we have to demolish the church. There's a thought that we might build a small chapel so that that can be used at that end of town. But what we do with the rest of the land is something we need to think about as well. Whether we retain the parking area that's currently there on the corner and create a new parking area in front of where the church was. There's options like that we need to think of. We will have to get engineers' reports and things, but again, it's possibly another community facility site that you might want to think about.
Thanks for that answer. Much appreciated, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Judy and Roy, thank you for your submission. I suppose I'd like to also thank you for giving us an indication that there could be possible opportunity down the track with the property. So we appreciate that also.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. I'd now like to call up the submission number 92 on page 196 from the Athena Women's Collective. Oops. Can we go with them? Do you wish? And it's Jean Hira, Mary Ann Meechan and Kerry Hockart. Kia ora.
We're missing Jean.
Would you like to wait?
I think that would be
Yes,
good if we
we'll
could, yeah.
actually, we can. Cameron, are you ready?
Oh,
Can't
thank you.
wait. Thank you very much. Not a problem, ladies. Welcome, Cameron. Cameron Jenkins is submission number 39, Manawatu Tenants Union 82. When you're ready, Cameron, no rush.
Kia ora everyone, thank you. I'll take my submission as read. I am the organiser coordinator for the Manawatu Tenants Union. So I really just want to iterate the main point in our submission that tenants also make up a significant portion of the Palmerston North population. According to the most recent census data, 44 to 50% of Palmerston North's population are renters living in 35 to 37% of the homes, of which those 74 to 79% are in the private market. So just to reiterate that 50% of the city's population are in rented accommodation. So while they may not be ratepayers, they are affected by the users and the services that the city offers. And so it's important that we actually take into account the effect that cutting services have on those people who are indirectly paying rates. But I thought the fact that I deal with housing, I thought it would be a good opportunity to leave it open to questions, use the majority of the time for questions rather than reiterating points in my submission.
Thank you, Cameron, and can I say it was very thorough to your submission. Councillors, any questions to ask of Cameron? Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Cameron, for the submission as well. It was great. In terms of the issues that are facing renters that you think council could be doing something about, what are, say, the top three that you think we should be focusing on?
There's affordability, and I'm not too sure what this council can do per se to affect that, but I certainly believe there are things that the council could be doing more around how we can work that. I don't necessarily know, in terms of other costs and services that tenants pay, whether we can do too much around things. I'm thinking, you know, electricity costs or the other expenses that they incur. I definitely think things we are doing, you know, around access to public transport, making those more affordable for our tenants who are probably in more vulnerable situations and less able to have access to certain things is a great help. Certainly the pilot around the rubbish bag scheme that you were trialling, I certainly know that is a big help. So sometimes those little things do add up, but I don't necessarily know if the whole responsibility solely sits with the council. But I certainly know that if we stop spending on our social housing portfolio, that's going to make the situation a lot worse.
Okay, thank you. Do you think that council's provision of social housing has an effect on the private rental market?
I haven't done too much study into that, but anecdotally I would say yes, it does. I think it sets the standard. I mean, if we look at I drove down Papaioa Street where the new building's done, and just the look and the layout of it, and it's kind of sets what I think we should be aiming for as a city, with, you know, nice housing, done well, looks great. And I think if we as the council can set the standard of what we expect housing to be in the city, then I think that's what we need to hold other private renters or private property owners who are renting their houses out should be aiming for.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Kim. Was interested in the four presumably papers or some other sources that were referenced in the submission. I realize you may not have done all the writing, and it may have been Daniel doing some of the writing. I was interested to know if they were kind of New Zealand-based forms of evidence, or whether they're kind of international studies that you're kind of drawing into a more local context.
I couldn't answer that, but I do believe one of them is actually from a New Zealand source. They were a part of the psychology school in Massey, who actually did their PhD on social housing in New Zealand. But I couldn't talk to that. I don't want to speak to that, because that would be a little bit out of my depth there with those.
No, that's all right. But would you be comfortable that the points made are locally relevant, even if they are internationally?
Absolutely, yes.
Great. Thank you. That's helpful to know. And it may have been quite similar to Councillor Johnson's first question, which I didn't fully catch, but you're talking about kind of service cuts and being concerned about that.
Yeah, particularly around the, you know, some of our vulnerable people that I see through our office are in need and have used the social housing that the council have provided. And so my concern is if we stop spending in that area, that the impact that's going to have on them and the wider community will be huge. And I encourage that we actually almost need to spend more on key things like maintenance and provisions around the social housing to really keep them up to date and keep them modern, tight, healthy for those people that are living in them.
Great, thanks. That's really helpful clarification. So it's more you're concerned about cuts within that domain versus kind of a broader domain of cuts across other council activities in sports or arts or whatever?
Yes.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. Yeah, when we look at people in housing and homelessness and everything else, most of what we hear in the newspapers and stuff is about families. I would like to hear from you about the situation in Palmerston North, about single people and older people.
Absolutely. I mean, I a few months ago, I had a call, I've nominalised this, but we'll call them, Mr. or Mrs. Thompson, rang me up because they were facing a rent increase of $60 a week, and that was putting them to the point where their entire pension was paying their rent. and that the money that they had accumulated for them to live in their retirement might have been around sort of $80,000, $90,000, which is not a lot, but as a result of that, they weren't able to qualify for any social housing, any council housing, and they were directly paying their savings to pay their insurances, their groceries, their power bill. So anything that they did was effectively going to impact the funds that they had available for the rest of their retirement. And so when a single person's pension is the entirety of their rent payment, how can they live? They are reliant on the services that the council offer, you know, free buses, the parking for the Super Gold people. So if we cut those services, these people are going to be living in their homes, not able to go anywhere or do anything. So it is important. And it is something that is coming more and more. We look at rent. The average rent is $600 for our city. And if you look at what the minimum wage is, even with it going up, you're only looking at about $150 left over in someone's budget to pay for the other items that they have to pay for outside of rent. And so if you're on a, you know, single person, that's all you've got left. You're making a decision whether you pay the power or, you know, go for a drive to the park or something like that. It is huge, and I would hate to think that people are having to make those decisions.
Councillor Zebulon.
Thank you. Thanks, Cam. Just bouncing off Councillor Finlay's question, I was interested in the stats and the numbers that you put in there. I was wondering, in your work, do you see an overrepresentation of particular group or demographic, you know, with aged or students, for example, families, or is it a sort of mix among those renters?
I think what we have is we get an overrepresentation on the what we call the non-tenant renters. So those are people who are in a vicarious renting situation who are not necessarily on a tenancy. So that might be, you know, Mrs. Thompson, who's got a 4-bedroom house, in order to keep up with costs, is renting 3 of those out to students. So technically they're renting and using the services and all the facilities that our city provides, but they actually have no legal rights. So often it's a challenge of we see them overrepresented, but are not necessarily a part of a particular demographic.
Right,
that
so
I can
that's sort of
report on.
an insecure
Housing,
tenancy type.
yes.
Right. And that's becoming overrepresented.
Yes, more and more. We are seeing more and more people entering into boarding, flat sharing, house sharing arrangements in order to go from paying $600 a week down to paying $200 a week for a room. And even some of our boarding house facilities in the city are paying $300 a week just for a room in a boarding facility.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The final comment will be, or question will be, from Councillor Wood.
Kia ora, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to make sure my understanding of what your submission has been about is correct, a lot of the examples you've used of things that you are worried about could be reduced to things that haven't been reduced. So my understanding of your submission is you're urging us not to reduce things like bus services or gold car parking, rather than objecting to something we have reduced that you'd like us to put back in.
Well, yeah, I'm certainly saying that we don't want to cut anything, because the moment you start cutting things, you're either going to defer them to a later date, which is going to put pressure on them down the track, or they're just going to be disadvantaged straight from the word get-go. So I'm saying that great that we've got our budget under inflation, under 7%, but what have you not included that or deferred that is going to put pressure on later on? Because essentially you're just moving the pressure.
Okay, so there's not a specific or particular thing you want us to put back in, it's just in principle you don't want us to...
Take anything out. No, in fact, I would champion that you need to spend twice as much on social housing than you are currently.
Right,
you know?
Appreciate that.
And the pressure should be on, you know, if we can spend a sports stadium, then we can build more houses.
No, appreciate that clarification, thank you.
Just to be very clear on this.
You are clear, Cameron, and thank you very much for your submission and presentation. We're very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to now call up Jean Hedder, Mary Ann Meachin and Kerry Ann Hockard. Thank you. And there's one other, isn't there? Councillors, this is submission number 92 from the Athena Women's Collective on page 196 of your books. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Done.
I am Marianne Meechin, and I am starting this morning. And I have, yes, Jean and Kerry with me. And we also have Elizabeth, one of our collective members in the gallery supporting us, so who was also part of the submission process. Right, so I don't want to repeat anything that's here about our history, but I just want to flesh it out just a little bit. So the Athena Collective formed in 1989, and so we have been coming here for over 30 years, sitting at this table, talking to our city leaders, and we have sharing our concerns, and we are very appreciative of being able to do that. And so that goes for this morning as well. So thank you. Our submission relates to all of the 5 goals that we've mentioned here on the front page, but it also relates to Athena's vision. And I'm just going to touch on that very briefly because we don't want to take away from the content in here, but I'm just going to do that now. So Athena's vision is a world where structures, systems and relationships honour our interconnectedness and bring fullness of life. So our mission is to support each other in realising our vision, particularly a commitment to Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So we have headings under values and actions. I'm just going to read you the words, the headings. I have copies here if you want to look at this more fully. So values and actions, guardianship and caring, thoughtful planning, presence, reflection, truth, justice and courage, compassion, strength and solidarity. These ground us and these have shaped our submission. So for those of you who don't know us so well, I hope that just gives you a little bit more of an understanding of what we're about. Thank you. We want to, before we start on ours, we just want to endorse the Housing Network submission and the work they do, invaluable to us in preparing our submission, and also the work they do for all of us in the city, and also the Environmental Network. Wonderful, and we want to endorse their submission at this time. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to, which way are we going? To Kerry. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Firstly, thank you. I just would like to continue our thanks for the progress that's been made in active transport, helping our city to be a safe place to cycle, the commitment to green spaces, the electric bus fleet being implemented, and the growing awareness of the need for food security. These are some of the actions that will help us reach the goal of reducing Palmerston North's greenhouse emissions. For the sake of our community and our legacy to future generations, we cannot afford to weaken our commitment to this place we call home. As our population grows, the increase in infill housing across our community has resulted in the loss of green spaces. Neighbouring parks with green spaces and trees and interesting play spaces and our street tree canopies will become even more important in providing enjoyable places to play and be an essential part of mitigating the effects of climate change. Safe, accessible walking and cycling tracks around the city give us a place where we can put aside the stresses of modern life and enjoy the beauty of our hour and our local parks. Well done to the Parks and Reserves team for shade being such a vital part of the Clovelly Park playground update. Please consider the accessibility needs of children and adults living with disabilities when developing parks and playgrounds. Secondly, we support the call for Palmerston North to be an age-friendly community. Our community needs to be accessible in our recreational spaces and in the places we live and work. We all need to stay connected, healthy, active and respected, whatever your age and stage in life. If we are to be an age-friendly city, we need to see measurable progress in age-friendly transport, housing, social connectedness, community support and health services. The call for support for social housing through this submission process has been strong. Warm, dry, social and accessible housing leads to an improvement in social outcomes for the community. This is not the time to be reducing that commitment. We need innovative housing models to cater for the needs of the elderly, including our Kaumatua and Pacifica elders, those living with disabilities, and intergenerational families. So what could an age-friendly community look like? Listen to the stories of the elders in our community. Listen to the wisdom of their past experiences and their needs. Out of these will come the vision of what a community looks like, where our elderly feel valued and not socially isolated, where they are living in a community that is more accessible, equitable, inclusive, safe and secure, and it fosters the health and well-being of people as they age. This was obvious to me in a recent example where a friend and I went for a walk in her local neighbourhood. She's now in a wheelchair, and we were trying to navigate the bumps and the cracks in the pavement. Each time we bumped something and hit one of the cracks, it caused her excruciating pain. This doesn't encourage our elderly people to get out and be able to go for a walk, connect with their neighbours, and that's and I hadn't realised just how important and how essential it is to have basic infrastructure like good footpaths. So I'd just now like to hand over to Jean to carry on our submission.
Kia ora koutou. I see we're running out of time, so I'll try and be very quick. Just wanted to add a few pieces to our eco-city, but before that I'd also like to, we do support Te Pū Harakeke, I think that got left out, as an important network for the city. And partnerships such as with the community, of course, firstly with Rangitane are so important to our City Council, and we have long affirmed that and just really want to acknowledge that. But in terms of our eco-city, we do want to add that so important is housing, but also food security is for our most vulnerable, and we're there for our most vulnerable. And we do want to support the Kai Resilience Project as a citywide project and policy, and think that is really important. So we wanted to add that. Also, I just want to say a bit about, we do want the eco-city, we want it to be a City Council-wide, from management through to governance, commitment. And from the smallest things, like not using plastic binding, for example, and it did fall to bits anyway, through to the big things of protecting our and our streams and et cetera, I do want to also say we need to get rid of some of the bureaucracy for small eco-city projects such as community gardens, Marakai, and I know a little bit about the Rosalind Commons project, and they're very small and they did all the groundwork and they talked to their neighbourhood and they got the support and they got funding for a shed which was put on, and they talked to council and everything, but council took the shed away because they hadn't got into a lease. I mean, why have a lease for a small neighbourhood gardens project? It's just crazy, and it takes a lot of time on council side as well. So I just think there's some areas where you could really do a lot more. So I'll leave it there because we've run out of time.
Kia ora. Over to you, Councillor Wood.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Thank you. And if I could ask a question perhaps through you to our staff team. This submission mentions, again, the climate change mitigation budget being reduced from 388,000 to 258. I asked yesterday if that was a reduction to an increase or a reduction to the actual budget, so I thought I might see if we have an answer to that question, if we know it's what it is.
I'm happy to direct that to council staff.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. No, the budget is increased from the current year to next year, but it's a reduction from what was planned in the long-term plan year.
So it's a reduction to the increase?
Yes.
So we'll still be increasing it by 258,000?
Not by 258,000, it goes from about 220-odd thousand to 258,000 from memory.
Apologies, understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Kia ora, thank you for your well-referenced submission. I just wanted to ask about the comments you made about rates, where you said that you support the change from capital-based to land-based rates as a fairer system. Can you talk a bit about why you think it would be fairer to do that?
I guess that comes from, again, being informed by our elderly population who end up sitting, there's a term for it, but they might be asset rich, but they have shorter cash. And so if you, depending on what's happening in your area where you live, you have these mansions built all around you. Well, you can have these mansions built all around you, which bumps up the property value. Everything's about the property value. And some of our people, a lot of our people are living in very modest houses actually, but they're in an area where there are some very elaborate houses. And so that's really what's informed this. It's just that, it's anecdotal. I know that the council has looked at that before.
And also around the country is a system that's used, so it is seen as fairer by other councils. So I guess that is also something we've considered.
That's great, thank you. Just wanted to try and expand on that point. Thank you.
Kia ora, everyone. I know that we've gone through to the red light, but I'm going to continue because we do have some time and it is important. Councillor Zebulon.
Thank you. Thank you all. I was interested that you noted you'd like to see increased investment in the Eco-City priorities. I was just wondering, in your view, where is the investment most lacking, or where is the attention most needed for our Eco-City priorities?
Well, that's a very difficult question because so much is needed. We're in a climate emergency, as we stated. So, I don't think that's our area of expertise in terms of stating that. So there are other groups that could talk to that better than us. But it is such a huge thing and so important. So we want to see it boosted for those reasons.
So perhaps just sort of more across the board?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great, thank you very much.
A lot more. And I know it's hard when you're constrained with funding, but...
Kia ora. And the final question from the Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jean, Marianne, Kerry and Elizabeth. Thanks for your submission. Pretty substantial. Look, I was interested in your comments around Jean, around the community gardens and our red tape. So Roslyn, that community in Roslyn just backed out because they had to go through a whole lot.
Oh, well, no, I mean, they did start off, no, they've got a garden, and they did start off before all the policy was established. But it's just become really hard, and
so you're looking
they
for
don't want to form an entity. They just want to get on and do it and share, and they are sharing, and it's great to see it there, but it doesn't fit with council processes. Yeah. I guess that's the problem, and it just needs to be a lot easier for small groups that aren't groups, that are just people coming together to do a garden.
So not an association or a
formalised
group.
That's right. They were able to use another group as an umbrella group for their funding for their shed. but they don't want to have to get into a lease, and they're people without a lot of money as well, and yeah, it just seems silly to me. It seems silly because it all takes up time for council, and I think it's
I agree.
unproductive.
I'm not a fan of some of this stuff either, but can I ask our officers, so do we have any flexibility around doing some temporary stuff with community groups, especially around community gardens, or do we have to go through the legal, formal lease process on every single occasion?
Through the chair, I'll probably take one for the team. It's not necessarily the issues that you might have up front, so we can have a look at how it is that we could create arrangements with community groups, but often it's if some groups aren't formalised, it's the work that council has to do when those groups potentially walk away. So I think that that's probably more the issue is if all of a sudden you've got a group of individuals, tend to be, if you've got a collective group or an association of stuff, they tend to be perhaps a little bit tighter.
So that the issue is the risk to council, is it, of the walkaways? Yep. Right, okay. I'm just trying to tease out an
You'd
option.
end up with a shed and just a little bit of sorting out the garden. I mean, it's not as if it's going to be much work if they walk away.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, everyone, don't pack up just yet. I am going to let 2 more councillors in, and then that'll be it. Councillor Barrett, followed by Councillor Hancock. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had thought I'd joined the queue, but obviously hadn't, so appreciate your willingness to accommodate it. Thank you for your submission. There's part of the written submission that says water needs to be available freely to all, safe and healthy. And I just wondered, could you tell us what that looks like to you and kind of what the gap is? Is there a gap in Palmerston North that needs filled to achieve that, and what you'd like to see done there?
Well, once again,
go on.
that's on a number of levels. I mean, we have an hour that desperately needs care and restorative action and streams. And I'm very conscious also of, with potential flooding, with heavy downpours and with climate change, that suddenly there's going to be new effects. I have a son who lives in the Pohongana East Valley, and they lost a whole edge of their property. It wasn't a hill, but because the stream took the bridge, it took a whole edge of their property and their entranceway out as well. So, and my understanding is that the level underneath that bridge had crept up over time as well. And I know this is complicated because it's regional council as well as Waka Kotahi, but things like that are important, but also just the ordinary water, which you might like to talk to Marianne, access for family.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's very tempting, isn't it, to think, okay, let's put a cost on water and people won't waste it because it's such a precious commodity, and we don't believe that. We've always submitted against that move. We believe that all it means is that if you've got more money to waste it, you will. And what we need to be doing is getting the community behind valuing this precious resource and helping households do the right thing. But that actually takes a lot of effort and a lot of staff and all the rest of it. But that's what we need to do, so that everyone here, from young to old, they value that water, particularly the water that comes out of our taps, because there's a lot of work that goes in to keeping that pure and drinkable. So that's what we need to focus on. And there's lots of, we could have had a whole submission on that actually, because there are lots of things that we could do to help households, that on these sections, at the moment there's a lot of stuff that actually, well, in my experience, that kind of goes against you doing the right thing. You're trying to do the right thing, but anyway, so does that clarify that?
Thank you both. I guess I thought I might have heard something around kind of potentially drinking fountains in public spaces and water refill stations and those sort of things.
But that would be great.
Yeah.
I mean, water is right up there as a precious human right. So yes, and once again, people who who are on low incomes, you know, they don't have their bottle of water and they don't have transport access to water fountains and things like that.
Oh, water,
or an empty
fantastic.
bottle to fill, yeah.
Fantastic. You go to Europe and you see all those wonderful fountains, they were drinking fountains, you know, and they create works of art around their drinking fountains. I mean, oh yeah, we've got lots of ideas.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Also,
Thank you.
Chair. Thank
Moving
you.
on to Councillor Hancock. Kia ora.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And thank you for coming in today. But I just want the discussion around the Roslyn Garden group, community garden group, that kind of piqued my interest. Just in terms of, do you think some support for those groups like that is needed so that they can basically sort of formalise themselves into something which can, I suppose, interact with council and also be sustainable in the future? Can you give us some commentary
Well,
around
it's
that?
not that there wasn't any support from council, but it's just along further down the track came the red tape. And they really just don't want it. And I don't think a lot of neighbourhood gardening groups want an entity. They don't want help to form an entity. They don't want an entity. They just want to do a neighbourhood kind of service and bring the neighbourhood together and get people involved. So just don't think they want to form an entity.
Okay, no, thank you, that's helpful.
Jean, Marianne, Kerry, Ngamihi and Elizabeth sitting up in the gallery supporting your team. Thank you so very much for your submission and for your presentation. Mana wahine, kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you again.
I'd now like to call Kate Alpin down. Thank you, Kate. And she is from Whatunga Tuao, Volunteer Central, submission number 21 on page 60 of our papers. Lovely to see you, Kate. Just whenever you get ready, we'll push the button. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou. Ko Kate Applin aho, tumu whakahaere o Whatunga Tuao. I'm Kate Applin, Manager of Volunteer Central. I'd like to acknowledge mana whenua and elected officials and thank Palmy City Council for the opportunity to talk to the Whatunga Tuao Volunteer Central submission into the annual plan review. The decision for Palmy City Council to review the annual plan spend must be commended in light of the current national economic crisis, of which no part of the community is immune to. The challenge is to continue to support and connect the community while maintaining or developing physical infrastructure. We would argue that the people in our community are an integral part of the infrastructure and therefore need to be given as much consideration as physical items. A fair proportion of the Palmy community live rurally and may not pay rates to PNCC. However, they contribute significantly to the Palmy economy and vibrancy through working, shopping, playing sports, being involved in theatre and entertainment in Palmy, bringing their skills and talents to Palmy events. Current proposals to increase parking rates and moving vehicle traffic to the outskirts of the CBD disadvantage these contributors to the Palmy economy, as they have no option but to bring their vehicle into Palmy, as there are no public transport options available to them. Moving public parking spaces to the perimeters of the city potentially creates safety and security concerns and issues for people. Palmy has the highest rate of car thefts and break-ins in the country, and concerns for individual safety when accessing remote parking areas exist. Should the initiative to move parking outside of the CBD, PNCC require a robust planning process that takes into consideration security and safety of vehicles and individuals over a 24/7 basis. And the ongoing costs of providing and maintaining this must be factored into the community spend going forward if it is adopted. While sectors within the community are encouraged to work in a more in a more collaborative fashion to maximise resources and talent, we would encourage the PNCC and the neighbouring councils to adopt this way of working to ensure community resources from all areas are used in the most responsible way for the community overall. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Kate. I'm going to hand it over to Councillor Johnson for questions.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. Thanks, Kate, for your submission. You talked about removing parking from the CBD, but was that something that you read in the annual budget, or is that just a general comment? Because I'm not clear that we have proposed that we're doing that.
So, in my understanding in the long-term city planning is that the CBD is traffic-free or vehicle-free. And at this point in stage, if we start making decisions around increased parking rates and costs, etc., then that ultimately impacts the longer-term planning. So we need to be looking at the long-term picture now rather than wait until further down the track.
Okay, so that wasn't in response to a specific suggestion that you'd read in the annual plan?
It was to make sure that we keep the community budget for community events and community vibrancy and community safety and connection. So it's not about that you've proposed a reduction in that budget, but I want to endorse that you don't consider a reduction.
No, sorry, I think we might be at cross purposes. I was talking about the parking.
Oh, sorry. Well, the parking actually is influenced by people coming into the city. So if you impact the city parking, the parking in the CBD, then it impacts on people's ability to come and support the city.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I guess I was just clarifying that your comments, you made some comments about parking being reduced, but I wasn't aware that that was something that had been proposed in the plan. So I was just asking, was that a specific comment relating to something proposed this year, or is it just a more general comment?
There is a proposal to increase parking costs.
Okay, all right, so it's relating to the costs of parking. Okay, thank you. Sorry for the confusion on that. The other question was that you suggested that we should share resources with a local, nearby local authorities. What in particular, did you have some ideas about services or things that you thought we should share?
It is a challenge because I know it's councils are rate-based, but the reality is we've got very close neighbours and we have a lot of traffic between particularly Palmerston North and Manawatu, and also Palmy and Horowhenua. And there are services that exist in Palmy that would be of benefit to some of those outlying areas, and vice versa. And so it's more looking at how, as councils, can you look at that boundary line and say, how do we support the whole community? Because people in Manawatu work in Palmy. So it's a difficult one, I do understand, but if we want to use community resources effectively, there does need to be some collaboration across those boundaries on some initiatives. And as a social service provider, that's what we're being asked to do all the time, is work more collaboratively and look at your boundaries to make sure that the community spend is spent most effectively.
So was there a specific area that you had in mind when you made that comment?
No, again, it comes back to the parking and the transport into the city.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. The old saying is that this community in Palmerston North particularly depends on its volunteers. In your opinion, how many of the volunteers in our system would be gold card holders? Your opinion?
The statistics that I have done most recently not that everyone will share their age with us, would indicate that around about 35% are over the age of 65.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And parking now, a lot of volunteers would depend on when they come into town to bring their car and park in cars, so they would have to pay for parking when they're volunteering?
It depends on the organisation that they're volunteering for. Some of them may reimburse that parking or not. A lot do use public transport or walk or whatever. However, I know it is being looked at to increase after hours buses, etc. But for example, there's a whole heap of people out at IPU, for example, International Pacific University, who would love to volunteer, but they can't get into town to do it after hours. And they don't have their own vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Kate, for your presentation. I wanted to pick up a little bit on your answer to Councillor Johnson's questions. And I may not have heard it correctly, so I just want to clarify it first. But is it your understanding that Council is going to remove cars from the entire city centre?
From the CBD, yes.
Can I ask kind of where you came to that view from? Like how did you become aware of
I sit on the Te Pūhara Keki. I'm a member of the Palmerston North, it used to be the Palmerston North Community Services Council, and there's been a lot of talk in that, in those member forums, and also from some elected members that have come and spoken at those presentations or in those forums about the desire to have the CBD vehicle free.
Can I ask, beyond those discussions, kind of were there efforts to validate that view?
Well, if we look at, for example, the parking, there's very limited parking in the CBD now. It's being pushed further outwards. So if you extrapolate that out, then you're not wanting vehicles in the city centre because you can't get parks in the city centre. So if you look at the total picture of it, you might fragment things out and say, okay, that's about not wanting, wanting more foot traffic and reducing emissions in the city centre. However, that also impacts on other parts of business in the city centre.
Thank you. That's very helpful insight into how that came about. Finally, can I just ask, are you aware of the proposed adjustments in terms of fees and services this year through council?
With regards to parking?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
yes, I understand there's a consultation process about to kick off again.
Okay, I'll probably leave it there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That's the end of the questions, Kate, but thank you so very much for coming along and making your presentation. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Ngā mihi. I'd now like to call upon our final submissions for this session. Peter and Isabel Wilson. Their submission number is number 28 on our in page 68 of our book. Thank you. And welcome, Peter and Isabel. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. And thank you very much for the opportunity to address Council with our submission on the setting of rates. We're here because our rates increased this year by 51%, and that is because rates are currently based on land value alone. We've had a very, very high increase in the value of our land. The increase in rates that we've experienced this year of just under $2,600 is more than a number of people in our street pay in rates in total. So our submission is that the rating system based on land value alone, rather than capital value or improvement value, is inequitable and unfair. And this submission proposes that Palmerston North residential rates assessment uses a total valuation rather than either a land valuation or an improvements valuation. Our land area is large, we acknowledge that. It's 2,428 square metres. We also have a high valuation, which is 1.81 million. Our improvements are 140,000, which is a relatively low ratio of improvements to land value. It also says that our residence is actually quite humble. In 2021-22, our rates were 5,235. Our present rates are $7,905.01. We're not arguing about the 1 cent. We're arguing about the increase from previous years and the inequity that I'll describe. So our increase of 51% is 8.8 times the average Palmerston North rates increase for residences. And we consider to be this unfair when the same total value property elsewhere in town, their owners are paying significantly less rates. And by one or two examples that we've looked at, that differential can be as high as 60% or up to $3,000 or more. We understand and accept that there is an equity principle in setting rates and a differential rate between people in the town based on their ability to pay. We don't have a problem with that social equity basis at all. One of the principles of social equity, of course, is fairness, and that's the basis of our submission. The differential based on value should be uniform across the city or across the ratepayers and not a variable between them. And we think that this is best demonstrated by looking at the ratio between land value and total value. If you take that ratio across town, you'll find that there's a very, very wide variation. In our situation, the ratio is about 93% value for land compared to total. In other situations, it's below 50%. If you take the improvements value to total value ratio, you get the same type of disparity. And so regardless of whether you choose one component, one of those two components or the other over total value, you find the basis of the inequity in terms of setting rates. The principle of fairness can only be achieved by using one financial parameter or choosing only one financial parameter that demonstrates the overall value of the property and not just a component of the valuation of that property. We believe that therefore that the total valuation is a much fairer and more equitable means of assessing rates. It's notable that most municipal authorities in the country choose a total value rating system. In fact, our Google search has shown that this to be 71%. I can be corrected on that if that's not correct, but that is a fairly significant majority of councils around the country that use total value rather than either land or improvement value. So arguably, Palmerston North has become an outlier in this respect. We've looked at the effect of total valuation scenario on our property based on the property values on our street, and there are 59 properties in our street. And if we account for the fixed or the uniform charge, which in our street anyway, it may be the same across the city, is $1,089 per property. If we took our land area in relation to the land areas of our whole street, our rates this year would be $6,402. That's our estimate. It might not be the actual estimate, but it won't be very far from what council would determine if it was based on total value. That would be an increase of 22.3%, which is still significantly higher than average, but we do understand that there is an equity basis for setting rates. We believe that 22% would be rather fairer than our present 51%. And what the capital value rating system would effectively do is to present a more fair and equitable distribution right across the city. We understand that that will result in some people paying more, but that will be relatively less of an increase than what those of us who have this wide disparity between land value and total value experience. It's therefore a much more equitable system. We know that there are a significant number of property owners in Palmerston North who experience the same concerns that we have. Some of them reside in our street, and you have received submissions from one or two others from our street, and there will be another in-person representation this afternoon that will provide some more figures to help your thinking on this issue. So just to summarise, we urge Council in future to introduce a total capital rating valuation assessment system rather than continue with our present inequitable system of land valuation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Peter and Isabel. I'd now like to pass it over to Councillor Zebulon. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for coming in to present to us today. Just a couple of questions from me. How long have you been living at Carina Terrace?
I think it's 42 years.
And you've never had a rates hike like this before?
Sorry, have we
never had a rates hike like this before?
I wear hearing aids, I'm sorry, and the acoustics here are really bad for hearing aids. I've brought my translator. Not of this extent. We've had a long list of rates increases that have been somewhat higher than the average. And what we've chosen to do is to look at them and get on with life. This time we were prompted to look more closely and find out just exactly the extent of the inequity and some of the reasons.
Thank you. And just looking at sort of your capacity to absorb rates increases of this nature in the future, what sort of impact might that have on you going in future years going forward?
Well, if they keep going up at that rate, I think there's only one logical conclusion for us, and that is that we would need to sell, because almost our entire taxable income now is national superannuation. And when we include Horizons rates, which incidentally increased by 10.1%, not 51, we would find ourselves in a situation that we wouldn't be able to survive on our regular income. On the other hand, we're not moaning about paying rates. We have been able to afford it, but we want to be we want to be satisfied that the charges that are placed upon us are fair and equitable. Other people with the same value situations that we have should pay the same amount of rates, not 60% of the value that we pay compared with some that we've looked at.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor, online.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Peter and Isabel. I definitely agree with your comments, and you've clearly got a good understanding of the situation. I'm just wondering if you are aware that we are undertaking a rating review.
Yes, we are. We've spoken to a number of councillors already about this, and we are aware, and we feel that people in our situation should have the right to come and demonstrate why it is that what council is going to be reviewing should be reviewed in the direction of a capital value system rather than retention of the present system.
Thank you. And are you also aware that any change that we make or any change that's agreed upon wouldn't take effect till July 24?
Yes, we are aware of that. We would like to have had that earlier, but good things take time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Naylor, and thank you, Peter and Isabel, once again. That's the end of our questions. We're very grateful that you made the submission and that you came along in person to talk to us. Thank you very much. Tēnā kōrua.
Kia ora.
Councillors, we're going to go into, we've got a little bit of time, so we'll go into the late remit. Thank you. Yes. The remits to Local Government New Zealand 2023 Annual General Meeting. The reason for lateness was the remits were received after the agenda was published. And the reason for the urgency is Hamilton City Council have requested a response by Friday the 17th of May. Now you have that information in front of you. Is there anyone who doesn't? There we have it. So, Council resolves to endorse or not endorse the 2023 remit proposal on virtual quorum from Hamilton City Council, attachment 1. Number 2, to endorse or not endorse 2023 remit proposal on KiwiSaver for elected members from Hamilton City Council, attachment 2. And number 3, to endorse or not endorse the 2023 remit proposal on development of a shared understanding and centralised framework of wellbeing from Hamilton City Council, attachment 3. Do we have a mover? Well, first of all, we'll take one at a time. Number 1, do we choose to endorse or not endorse? Discussion, Councillor Barrett?
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to move that we endorse all 3.
And I have a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Barrett and the Mayor. Demonstrated. Any discussion? We have that on all 3. Sounds like we're ready to...
I think I'm in the
Oh,
queue.
sorry, here we go.
Yeah.
Councillor
Sorry,
Johnson.
Madam Chair, if I could have 2 separated, please, and I'm happy to speak to it. Do you want me to stand? Yeah.
Yes, I'm just waiting for the team to get that done.
With that, can we have 1 separated as well?
We're going to separate the 3 of them.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I just wonder if they're all separated and then it's nice and easy. We can vote on each separately, and probably best that the mover probably speaks first rather than Councillor Dennison.
Thank you. We will start with to endorse the 2003 remit proposal on virtual quorum from Hamilton City Council. Councillor Barrett, would you like to talk to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to speak to it. Briefly, I had the chance to read through, and I felt that the arguments presented by Hamilton City were reasonable, and was just quite happy to see it advance to a further debate, at the LGNZ annual general meeting. And I think our primary function here is to foster these issues being elevated to that wider forum for debate. So I would encourage you to endorse all three so that we can see that wider debate around them at the LGNZ meeting.
Sorry, I was obviously in the queue from previously. That was okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the only one I'm going to rise to speak on. I support the other two remits put forward by Hamilton, but this one I have some concern over. We have to make decisions based on the lowest common denominator, and unfortunately not all councils have the same, I would say, respect for the position that those in this council do. At the moment, I could move to Wellington and attend every council meeting via Zoom link if I wanted to. I could never step foot in Palmerston North City again for the rest of the term. Now, on principle, I don't think that's right, but the reality is people are allowed to attend meetings over Zoom, and that is what it is. But taking it the step further that we add people who are on Zoom to the quorum means that you could have an entire council, theoretically, that didn't reside in the area that they were supposed to represent. Now, of course, that's the extreme, and I'm not suggesting that that's likely to happen, but except for in cases of particular emergency where councils aren't allowed to meet in person, aren't able to meet in person, I think much more robust debate happens when you have the majority of your team in the chamber able to have that free and frank discussion. I think to endorse this would support or would encourage people to not attend meetings online. And although I accept that it's useful to have, in cases such as, for myself, I had COVID, I wasn't able to make one of the meetings and I attended online, I've got no issue with people being able to do it. But if the majority of your council, or at least a quorum of your council, aren't there in person, I don't think it should count to quorum. I don't think it leads to as good a debate, and you do encourage or provide scope for worst case scenario where people don't or consistently abuse it. So I won't personally be supporting this particular remit, but the other two I'm happy with.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. The Mayor, thank you.
I have to stand. Ooh, this is a new experience. Okay. So, look, I'll speak to all three, Madam Chair. Look, I will support, I'll speak to the first one initially. Councillor Wood is right. I mean, that could happen. But in reality, I think round the table you would get, your colleagues would censure you on this. So an example is today. We have people that aren't here in person because of either sickness, ill health, or they have something that is absolutely in their schedule, but they're still participating in. We're in 2023. And look, let's be honest. All of you have just about got devices around you. We have to be realistic. Yes, the real debate does carry on in this chamber, and it's called a debating chamber for that very reason. But you've just got to be realistic. I get that we want to have everybody in the room, and I think around the table will ensure that that does happen. So this is just being real, so I ask you to support it. It was good standing too, thank you.
You're welcome, Mr Mayor. Councillor Michellet, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to support this, actually, and also I'm going to speak. Basically, the Mayor has highlighted the points that I was going to make. We are in 2023, and COVID has made it very easy for us to actually join online from whichever parts of the world that we're part of, or wherever we are. For example, today we've got some councillors who can attend today or be with us today due to other commitments, not because they don't consider council to be the most important thing or an obligation to the community, but it's just that life happens. And online provides the flexibility to join from wherever you are at any moment in time. And also, the reason why we should actually support this, or I would encourage people to support this, is to remove the barriers that some people might have. Some will have children and can attend physically. And we need to provide an environment for them, a safe environment for them to be able to participate in a way that they feel comfortable. For the ladies or the women here present, one person might get pregnant or is giving birth, and they can join from the comfort of their home or wherever they are. Those are just the extreme. Those are just the extreme, but those need to be taken into consideration. They are the extremes, but they have to be taken into consideration for those who Or I might be sick, you know, my leg might be broken. I'm sitting at home. Those are the extreme. I know that those are the extremes, but that's the comfort that online environment also provides. Or you could be somewhere away, or something might have happened to you. It happens. So I'm really happy to support this. And these are the sort of flexibility that the online environment actually brings us. And if you decide to move to Wellington or to Auckland, and you want to live in a different country and attend online from Australia, wherever you go, France or the United States, at the end of the day, you are accountable to the community. The community will judge you on that, and also your colleagues will judge you on that. So let's not make things harder or put more barriers for ourselves. And let's come, you know, like the mayor says, you know, it's the reality that we're now in. It's an online environment, and let's make it easier for colleagues to actually do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michelad. Councillor Meehan, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to jump into this, but after so many giving birth, I thought I had to. This, to me, the way I'm reading it, I might have it slightly wrong, is talking about quorum. So I think sitting around the table to have a quorum is not a problem. If whatever the quorum is, and we have that many people giving birth at that time, hopefully, this isn't about being able to attend virtually. We're doing that, and that's working really well. I'm in full support of that, but I'm not in support of a quorum being virtual. I think it has to be around the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We don't have any other people indicating they'd like to speak to this, so I'd like to pass this back to the mover, Councillor Barrett. He has no further comment to make.
I will say, I think the debate has gone as far as it needs to, and possibly further.
I must say, I've never seen so many smiles around the council as Councillor Michelad's comment. Could I please ask that we vote on that? Thank you. That has passed 75% to 19% no and 1 abstaining. Thank you. Moving on to number 2, to endorse the 2023 remit proposal on KiwiSaver for elected members from Hamilton City Council, attachment 2, moved Councillor Barrett and the Mayor, and Councillor Michelad. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Barrett, forgive me.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just brief comment to open the debate. Again, I read this component of the proposal from Hamilton City Council. I thought that they made some quite rational arguments and make sense, again, for us as council to support this so that there can be a wider discussion at the LGNZ AGM acronym soup.
Thank you. No, it's now the Mayor. Thank you.
Quite liking the standing, it's good. Colleagues, look, I think we do need to support this. We're treated as, we're in an unusual employment sort of situation, or I should say remuneration situation, where we're the odd one out. We're actually not employed, but we're not contractors either. We're treated as contractors, but as a contractor you can't claim anything. You have to pay your own ACC. You have to pay your own or find your own money for KiwiSaver. This is just putting it perhaps back in balance a little bit more. I've found it really, really odd coming from a business background and then coming into this place. And there's absolutely the amount of benefits to an elected member, you are actually quite disadvantaged. So I think this is just putting a small benefit, which is, I think, a very necessary one around KiwiSaver. Because if you're around this table for a decade, and let's be honest, if you do a couple of terms, that's what it is. You're excluded from what every other New Zealander has the rights to in KiwiSaver. So this is you're not getting anything extra. You're just getting what you should deserve. So I encourage you to back Hamilton on this, and I'm confident that we'll get strong support for this around New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have no further speakers, so we'll go to a vote. Thank you. Oh, right of reply. By Jose. Forgive me.
Not needed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That has passed 100%. Thank you. Moving on to number 3, to endorse the 2023 remit proposal on development of a shared understanding and centralised framework of wellbeing from Hamilton City Council, attachment number 3. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, just to open the debate, I had to read through. I'm particularly keen on this one because I think there are a lot of different kind of spins that are put on well-beings, and I think having a more joined-up conversation around it would be helpful. So really commend Hamilton City Council for bringing this to our attention, and hope that you all would support it on that basis.
Thank you. I don't have any speakers in the queue, so therefore we will go to a vote. Thank you.
So you just adjourn the meeting to
That is passed 100%. Thank you very much to the council staff and to councillors. I now call that we will adjourn our meeting until our next session. Thank you very much for your participation, and also to the submitters as well. Kia ora koutou. Yes, we can secure this room.